because here is something else I've found that may tell us why this dumper was parked up in the first place. Right, muckers, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, good to have you along. Now, the continuing saga of the little Thwaites dumper. Now, as you know, if you've watched the previous 2 episodes, we had a look at the dumper initially and we thought we'd see if we could get it running. We found we weren't getting fuel up to the injector. And in the second episode, we stripped out the little injector pump, cleaned it all up, got it all working, replaced 1 or 2 little bits, and we now have fuel up to the injector. So the next thing everyone would be saying is, well, we'll do a will it start? Yes, normally I would. However, in this instance, no, because we've got other issues. But why was it stood up? Now, a lot of people would have thought, well, because it didn't run, because of that injector issue, because that pump wasn't going in. I don't think it is. I just think that the pump issue developed because it has stood up and hadn't been run. And therefore, as I said, it started to, seize. There was bits of rust and whatever in there. So why wasn't it used? Why was it stood up? Well, when I got it and we got it off the trailer, it was loaded on the trailer with a forklift. We unloaded it with a forklift. And I did notice that the steering was stiff, very stiff. But that's not unheard of on these dumpers. In fact, as I said to somebody the other day, they sort of said, what's the steering like? I said, it's stiff, but, it does move. And it does. One way. And that's the thing. The biggest killer of these dumpers, why most of them got stood up and scrapped, is because of this. Now, as you can see, this doesn't have a cab on it. So this would be out in the elements at all times, on site and whatever. And what used to happen is, obviously, especially over the winter, you'd get rain and whatever, and the rain would go all over it and go on here and it'd dribble down here. And they used to run down the steering shaft. Then what used to happen is that all the water would collect in the steering box underneath here. You can see it. There's the steering box there. Okay. Now they're meant to be full of oil, but eventually the water would just push all the oil out of everywhere and just fill it with water. Then what would happen is, well, basically it would rust up and seize. Combined with all the dust and grit, what used to get there was the perfect recipe for a seizure. Now, going back to this particular dumper, as I said, when I took it off the trailer, I saw that the wheels had turned. I said, that's all right, that's not too bad. I know the steering was sort of creaking a little bit. We'll put some oil in that, free it up, not a problem. However, the other day I was thinking, right, so what we'll do now, we'll get the oil changed, and then we will drag this across the yard and try to get it starting. Well, why don't you use the starting handle? 2 reasons. The handle isn't the best handle in the world, and it's basically, it needs a bit of work done to that. But the main thing is, this isn't a dumper that ran yesterday. Now, if it had ran yesterday on site or whatever, you could swing that over and, yeah, she'd fire up. But this has been stood, bits have seized up and whatever. As I said, it's just been stood for so long. And this will be its first start for a long time. And they're a pig like that. And I'm not going to stand there like some bloody organ grinder with, with the monkey dancing on top of his barrel organ. Just drag it across the yard. Why wouldn't you? Why work harder? Work smarter. But in order for us to do that, we need steering. Otherwise, we're just going to either go round that way or we're going to go round that way. But as I said, it does turn one way, but not the other. It then locks up. It gets to this point here and then locks up. So even if we did get this fired up, well, the next job, we want to see if it drives. And then if it drives, we need steering. So we might as well do it this way. We might as well get the steering sorted. So when we do drag it around for a will it start, once it does start, we can take it for a little ride round. Right, so we just jacked this up, put the axle stand under there to give us room to work under there to get that steering box released. So I'm just going to chock up around here and there, and then we'll get on with it. Remember, work smarter, not harder. So we're now going to go and pick up something else. So I'm thinking we need a little bit more than just a jack. and an axle stand.
Shake hands with danger.
There we go. I can get under there now and work safely. Well, better than it was. Right, so there's the steering box. It's attached to that plate up here. 2 bolts. So we've got to separate this off here. That won't just pry off or anything. We tried all that, so we've got to get a proper splitter on there and puller and get it in there and then draw that off. Now, one thing we want to do now, before we even start, is to try and just clean all this up with a wire brush and squirt some penetrating oil on that in there, because once it starts to go, that's when people do it. It's like, well, no, you know, try and reduce the amount of friction before you even start. Get it ready, so once it starts to come, it can keep going. Right, muckers, so in order to continue with my pledge to explain stuff rather than just assume you all know what we're doing, right, this is the back half of that puller. Now, obviously a legged puller would hook in behind there, but the trouble is, quite often, leg pullers only got a little bit that catches on behind there and they can soon slip off. So if you can get this type on, for pulleys and bearings and stuff, they're the best to use. But anyway, basically it traps behind the back, so it can't really slip off. Then we put the front part on, which I'll show you in a minute. We'll do that bit, and that's the bit in the middle there where it all draws from. So basically what you want to do is you're putting the pressure on there, and then this will draw and hopefully pull that off this shaft. So the legs go on, as you can see there. We've now screwed those in. Alright, now we've got the outer part of the puller on. You see that? So we leave that loose till we get the centre part adjusted, so it touches that piece in there. So it all lines up nicely. Then we can tighten these down. Alright? Alright, so let's apply a bit of pressure to this. The eagle-eyed amongst you will see it is pulling up, because of the arm, a bit of an angle. But once we get a bit of movement on, we can readjust that. There we go. Now, I couldn't do everything, film and operate single-handedly, so just to let you know, I managed to get this chisel, use it as a drift, just behind there, to apply more pressure, to squeeze it on, then crank on there a bit, like that, and off it come. So, there we go. The other thing you'll notice is I did obviously disconnect that brake cable. That's just easier. But there we are, like, if you can just see up in there, that's the spline. Now that arm is now coming off. And that's how it works. So I hope, if you haven't used one of these before, hope it gives you a better an idea. But you can see now, look, it can level up. But just the way the arm is, you can't really get any other orientation to clear that. There we are. That'll all need cleaning up once we got it off. But boy, that was on there. There was some pressure applied. Right, just in case any of you want to see what these sets are like. So that's the one I just used. You've got various sets of legs at different lengths. Obviously, if you've got to draw off a longer shaft. And then on the bigger ones here, look, this get behind bigger bearings and pulleys and drop arms and stuff like that. So yeah, that's what you get. Not a bad little set, as you can see. I have to admit, that took more pulling than I thought it would. There was actually a lot more, because I was getting that ratchet right up to the point where something was probably going to go wrong. So that's why I used that chisel, that drift, to take more pressure off and give that a little bit of leeway to then go again. And then that's what did it. So there we are. So the next job I want to do is undo these nuts and bolts. Like I said, you can see these have had some hard in their time, so someone's had this off or attempted to get off. I personally think they went to undo it all to see if they could do something with this box, and then they found they couldn't get that arm off. They tried sort of putting bars in behind, as I did first off, but as you saw, it needed a puller on there and that drift. So let's get them off there next so we can get this loose. Right, the next thing we've got to do is get this wheel off. Oh, I've already loosened that. So we give that a tap. It's been off once already. Sometimes these can be a pig. I mean, I had that one on that Dexter that time. And I had to use pullers on that and cut it all through. Oh, what a nightmare. But this one does come off all right. There you go. Oh, just get the other side of this. Right, let's see if we can. There we go. And that's there. All right, muckers, let's have a look. So that's that plate I was telling you about that I found just on the floor. And I think, well, I'm pretty sure, that actually goes down here. All right. I think that's where that goes and covers up something there. So that looks about right. So that goes there. Here's some odds and sods I found as I was taking bits apart. Yeah, I think some of you will already recognise what's kind of going on here.
That was fucked. That was a bit fucked.
So, let's remove this cover here. That one there. And we'll have a little look in there. Now, as I said, this turns one way, then it gets to another point, and it seizes up. But I don't know if you can see in here, but oh.
So you're blind? Yes.
Oh yeah, these little round ball things. I don't think they're meant to be floating around in there. Forget all this crud.
Shit everywhere.
But yeah. I think it might have ingested its own bearing, and I think that's what's going on there. And plus the balls and the little bit that they should be running round in not being together, I think we know what's happened. So, bearing is broken up. So what do we do next?
Well, I guess we're going the fuck on then.
So I think really we've got to start looking to disassemble this one. Again, I could go out and I can get a second-hand unit. They are about, but to be honest, people want as much money for the units as they do for the dumpers because, like I said, what's happened here has caused the demise of most of these old dumpers, to be honest. Right, so there we go, muckers. I think we're a little bit further forward, aren't we? Obviously. But question time. What do we do next? Seriously, what do we do next? Do we try and rebuild that steering box? Looking at it already, I can see there's damage to it where those ball bearings have sort of caught up in it and chewed it. Or do we try and find a second-hand unit? So there we are, muckers. A little bit of progress, but yeah. Until the next one. Do well.